Hi guys, welcome back to another Hugh Jeffries video. In this video, we're going to be repairing this dual screen LG G8X. Unlike other foldables such as the Galaxy Fold, this phone doesn't have one fragile folding display, but two separate displays. In fact, the second display is attached by a case, meaning it can be detached if it's not wanted. Taking the phone out of the case, we can get a look at the real extent of the damage. It's clear it wasn't used in this case often, and well, really wasn't looked after. The back is obliterated with shards of glass falling out, and the screen is cracked with several deep scratches. The frame of the phone shows scars of several drops. So with a bit of work, I reckon we can get this pretty unique looking smartphone back in a functional state. I'll be needing a new display and frame, as well as a new back panel for the phone. This particular display assembly contains the bare minimum components, so everything including the buttons on the sides of the phone will need to be removed and transferred into this new frame. To begin, I'll need to place the phone on a heat plate at 120 degrees just for a couple of minutes to heat up that back panel. This will soften the adhesive and allow us to be able to more easily enter the phone. A suction cup didn't work as of the severity of the cracks, so instead I just pried it up using a jimmy tool. I wouldn't recommend this if you're just doing a back glass replacement or a battery repair, as it's easy to damage that frame. As I'm going to be replacing both the frame and back, this isn't a problem. Working a few plastic picks around the perimeter will allow me to separate the back panel from the frame. Lifting it up and out of the way, we can get our first look at the internals in the LG G8X. There's not a lot to see as of the wireless charging coil and various antennas that are covering up most of the internals of the phone. They're to come out next, and they're held in place with several Phillips head screws. Even with the screws removed, you'll find the pieces are still clipped into place. The speaker assembly down at the bottom proved more challenging as it was tightly held in with its clips. With both sections free, we can finally take a proper look at the motherboard and battery inside the LG G8X. It has a similar overall layout to most Android phones, but it's good to see it also has a modular charging port. I'll remove the SIM card tray before proceeding, as our next stage is to get out the motherboard. I'll first disconnect the battery to remove any power running through the device before disconnecting the front-facing camera, display, and charging port. With that, the motherboard can be easily removed from the device. Turning our attention down to the charging port, I can unfasten the headphone jack, remove the fingerprint reader, and unadhere the charging port cable itself. There was some adhesive left behind by the charging port, which I decided to pull up and reattach to the cable itself, so when we attach it later on, it can be secured in nicely. Underneath that cable was the vibration motor. Using some alcohol, I was able to soften the adhesive and remove it from the frame. Up at the top of the phone, I'll need to remove the camera and the earpiece speaker. Next, it's time to take out the battery. And to do that, I'm going to place the phone back on the heat plate, this time face down, in an effort to heat up the adhesive that's holding in place the battery. Unfortunately, in today's times, batteries aren't easy to remove things anymore. They're held in with a lot of adhesive and often require heat and some prying. And that was no different for this LG phone. I really wish hot swappable batteries in phones was still a thing. When I stated that the new frame has nothing in it, I really meant that. We even need to transfer across this heat pipe, which is responsible for helping cool some of those chips on the motherboard. Even keeping my pick as flat as possible, the metal still bent. Luckily though, I could flatten it out quite easily using a spudger. Lastly, it's time for the buttons to come out. Like a few of the other components inside this phone, the cables are held down with adhesive and use pressure contacts to interface with the motherboard. Behind the button itself is a sticker, which I assume is for dust and water protection. Once it's removed, I can poke the button out of the side of the phone. This specific configuration is something I haven't seen before. The button is only held in by what seems to be a bit of rubber attached to the button itself, so you probably could remove them without even opening the phone. With everything out of the phone, it's time to get out our new display assembly. Pulling it out of the bubble wrap, it's time to start reassembling. Starting with the buttons, I will install them into the new housing, reusing the dust and water sticker that goes behind them. While I couldn't guarantee water resistance on a repair like this, doing everything the proper way may result in having some kind of protection, even if it's not as good. In the end, electronics and water don't mix, so features like this are really only meant for accident protection, not for taking photos underwater. Even if your phone is water resistant and has never been opened or repaired, it can still get water damaged, especially in salt water. So it's never a good idea to let your phone and water mix, even if it is so-called water resistant. Before reattaching the earpiece, I'll brush it down to remove any of the dust buildup inside it. Next, I can attach the front-facing camera, vibration motor, and finally, the charging port assembly. It was only after this point that I noticed a slight problem with our new display assembly. That was, it's coming apart. This is not something you expect to see from your $90 screen. As it was only one corner lifting, I decided to pack it full of liquid adhesive and hope it would hold. Of course, I wanted to make sure the screen wasn't just going to fall off, so I lightly pressed on the back to see if it was adhered well. Of course, it wasn't, and I could pull it right off the frame. That'd be right, I have to fix the replacement parts that are supposed to be fixing the phone. I tested the display and found it was still working fine. So I had to find a way of holding the display on. It had been held in with a bead of liquid adhesive, which is completely useless if used in a small amount. But as the bezel of this phone is so thin, I didn't have much of a choice. I decided that I was going to use some proper adhesive in the middle to make sure it really wasn't going anywhere. When it came to the liquid adhesive, I just went crazy, because this stuff is really weak, and is best suited to holding down cables and things less critical. With the adhesive applied, it was time to attach the display panel back onto the frame. After everything had been aligned, it was time to place the phone under a box of phones. This was so pressure could be applied to the display whilst it was drying. I heard a crunch from the other side of the room shortly after, and when inspecting the phone, you'll see that the display now has several cracks. So our replacement display to fix our shattered screen has let us down a second time, now with weak glass. Yes, putting this screen under a box full of phones probably wasn't the best idea, but it should be noted third-party replacement display panels aren't as strong and tough as the original ones, which is a shame as in a lot of cases you can't buy an original display panel. What I did buy was another third-party replacement. This one has the buttons, earpiece and heat pipe assembly already installed, as it looks to be a used frame. After removing the charging port from the first replacement display, I could attach it to the motherboard. I decided to install it this way to simplify the installation process. After seating the motherboard back into position, I could install the headphone jack and its accompanying screw. I applied some adhesive to hold down the microphone next to the USB-C connector to ensure that it doesn't come loose inside the phone. I could then reattach an antenna cable and install the fingerprint reader. After giving everything a clean with a microfiber cloth, I could reattach the speaker assembly and install its several Phillips head screws into position. I could connect the display cable and attach the front-facing camera. Proceeding, it's time to install the battery. I'll be using the same battery I pulled out, as this battery was manufactured at the end of 2019, and I've had this phone since the end of 2020, meaning it's only got about a year's worth of usage on it. It's time to attach the wireless charging module. It can simply be clipped back into place and have all of its screws reattached. It's finally come time to test out our phone to make sure our new replacement screen is working before we seal everything up. As you can see, the OLED screen is functioning as well as all of the touch. The last thing I'd like to check before sealing up the phone is the fingerprint reader. Certain Samsung models had issues with this after a screen replacement. With this LG, you can see that it's still functioning just fine. Turning our attention to the old back panel, I'll remove this piece of foam over the camera lenses as well as the lens for the LED flash. Things got a little bit destructive with the LED flash as it completely disintegrated whilst I was trying to remove it. However, the most important part of the flash mechanism is still there, so we should still be able to reuse it. I'll also transfer across the IMEI sticker and this barcode just to make things look nice and original. I'll use some of that previously mentioned liquid adhesive to hold in this flash. This is a perfect use case for such adhesive. Back at the phone, I will clean up any of the residual adhesive and wipe down the camera lenses and give everything a good clean before attaching that back panel. After lining everything up, it can be pressed down into position and secured in place for a few hours with some lacquer bands. Yes, I've learnt my lesson not to put things under a giant stack of phones. After some time, I can remove the lacquer bands and all of the protective film over our new display panel and back. And we're done. So this is it, the LG G8X, a phone with one screen or maybe two. It's your choice. This is a feature-packed phone with a headphone jack, no camera bump, and good screen-to-body ratio. It's great to see this unique phone back in perfect condition. Attaching the second display essentially provides you with another independent phone. I much prefer this approach than the foldable display technology. Why? Well, for a replacement display for a folding Samsung is around $900, this is only around $100. And when folding displays are made of plastic, fragile, and eventually going to break, I just don't see the point. This case not only provides an inner display, but one on the outside too. It displays basic information and notifications. But using this case means you are required to use a magnetic adapter in order to charge the phone. As much as I like this phone, I'm going to be forced to sell it, as what the seller didn't tell me when I purchased it was it was locked to Sprint in the US. I did attempt to unlock it myself, but their website declined my access. Using a VPN, I was able to gain access to their site, but I found their unlocking frequently asked questions useless and decided to contact support. They had a convenient contact section for international support. Pressing that though took me to a page promoting their SIM plans. So I just tried the regular sales support and that took me to a page where I could buy a new phone. It really looked like I wasn't going to get any help here. So I contacted the seller and they said they'd look into it, but I never heard back. I asked again, but after reading my email, they never responded. If anyone is wanting this phone, be sure to check out the Hugh Jeffreys online store, as I'm happy to ship it back to the US so someone can actually use it. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffreys video. If you like what you saw, hit that subscribe button and consider checking out the phone restoration playlist for more videos just like this one. And if you're looking for any used devices, be sure to check out my online store, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.